Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. My name is Jazz. Today we're going to be doing a case study on Blake Lively, Justin Baldoni, and Ryan Reynolds. Now this is really interesting because this is actually how I learned astrology for the first decade or so. I wasn't doing any formal readings. I was obviously looking at my chart and my transits and the people closest to me and their charts and their transits as things were going on. But celebrities' lives are very public, and it gives us an opportunity to learn from that public life. And so I think this is a beautiful way to look at a chart. And now that I've incorporated human design over the past few years into my readings, that adds a whole nother element and level of understanding for the situations at hand, why certain things could be happening, or why certain people may be acting certain ways. And so in this video, you guys are going to get a real-time practical approach to how I incorporate both astrology and human design charts, what kind of information they both give me, how they corroborate each other or how they build upon each other. It's just a really cool way to learning through osmosis as well, because as I'm going through things, I'm going to be teaching and talking about certain aspects of the chart and what that could possibly mean for you or for any charts that you're looking at. This is also another really cool way to garner understanding and compassion for others. Now, it doesn't mean that you have to like these people. It doesn't mean that you have to condone behaviors of people that you don't condone behaviors of. It's not excusing them through their charts. We never do that. Instead, it's more about how can I find compassion for them, even if they don't act the way that I want them to. Because ultimately, when we're critical and judgmental of others, we do the same thing to ourselves. And so the more we can kind of lessen that impact and say, hey, you know what, I don't like this person, but that's just the way they are, and I'm just gonna, speak my piece and say, I don't agree with this, and then move on from it. I think that's a critical component for me, at least in my journey of astrology and human design, because I'll look at somebody's chart who I don't like, and full disclosure, I added Ryan Reynolds into this because as things are going on, I'm hearing more and more about his involvement, which doesn't surprise me because Ryan Reynolds is one of those people that for whatever reason, I've always had like a visceral reaction towards, whom I don't know him, right? But I've always told my partner, like, I don't understand why people like him. Like, I think he's annoying, I don't think he's attractive, but people are like, he's so funny, he's so hot. And I've always been like, what? I don't get it. And when I looked at his charts, specifically his human design chart, it makes me understand where he's coming from. I still don't like him, you know? So it's like, but I'm like, ah, okay, like this is a person who's operating a lot out of fear. And that sucks for him. And like I said, doesn't condone anything that he may or may not have done. Or yeah, I can still be like, yeah, I still don't like him. I still have a weird visceral reaction. But actually it calms that visceral reaction more. And I'm like, oh, I remember like he's operating out of something that I don't like to operate out of. And we're gonna look at all their charts, kind of go through them. And I learned a lot looking through their charts. So I think you guys will learn a lot as well. And I plan to do more of these case studies as a teaching tool because, like I said, I do think they are very effective teaching tools. I think that's all I have to say. So let's get into it. Let's pull up their charts. We are going to start with Blake Lively's chart. Here is her astrology chart. I use whole sign houses here. The first thing that caught my eye when I first looked at her chart was this situation. Um, Virgo stellium in the second house. She's a Leo rising, Sun, Moon, Mercury, Venus, and Mars in Virgo. Whenever I see a stellium in a chart, I don't just look at the sign. The sign is important, yes, but especially when we have four or more planets in a certain sign, which she does. I would even say some points as well, like the North Node, I would probably count maybe, although technically they don't count in a stellium, but if you have three planets and a North Node, I'm going to count that as amplifying the energies. When I see this stellium, it tells me that somebody, regardless of where it's happening, has quite like an Aries-like quality, meaning that they're quite headstrong. They're not pulled in two different directions. Because if we think of Libra, which is the opposite sign of Aries, they're kind of pulled in two different directions because they're trying to balance. But Aries is like, let's do it, let's go for it. And that's kind of the energy that I see even just with sun and moon together. But if they have a ton of placements in one sign, these people have a lot of emphasis in especially this area of their lives, as well as that sign. But I worry less about how do I blend all of these planets together, right? What does it mean when you have sun and moon and Mercury and Venus and Mars conjunct in one sign? And if I have three planets, I'll do that more. But once we start getting four, five, six, seven planets, then it's like, okay, this person, number one, it's really showing that there's an emphasis on this part of their life, very large emphasis. And it's also saying that they're quite headstrong and they kind of know what they want and they go after it. There's less hesitation with these people generally. Because when we think of somebody who is Virgo dominant, we don't necessarily think of those qualities I just mentioned. We think of people who are very detail oriented and quiet and more introverted and service oriented. Now, those qualities I do think are very much present in her. I do think she's very service oriented because, as we're going to see in Ryan Reynolds' chart and from what I've read about him and things that have been said over the years, he's seems to be quite controlling person. And so a Virgo dominant person can do better with that energy than other people may because they tend to be so service oriented, especially the women in relationships. They can actually be in relationships with really difficult men or women, whatever, uh, with very difficult people that others may not be able to handle because they are just so service oriented in that way. So in my North Node in and South Node moving into Pisces and Virgo, I talked about how this can become like martyrdom though, and that's not necessarily a good thing. But so she definitely has those Virgoan qualities, and you've got to think about certain things like knowing that Venus is debilitated in Virgo, but Mercury is exalted. So this kind of was what I was talking about, how and Mars doesn't love being in Virgo either. So, because Mars is about action and movement, and Virgo is like, well, do we have all the details? How can we move forward? Like, it's much more analytical. So, Mars doesn't love being in Mercury ruled signs. And then also, Venus, like I said, is debilitated here. And so it doesn't love being in Virgo. So, this could mean that in relationships, like I said, this kind of amplifies the idea that maybe in relationships she does have some difficulties and she does have kind of perfectionist qualities within relationships that can make it hard to establish like real connections with people. But the Mercury in Virgo is exalted, right? And it's in its home. Mercury likes being in Virgo a lot. So this could mean that she's quite bright, she's quite intelligent, or she has a way of speaking that is very clear and effective. This is actually a really good placement for like managers and bosses. So maybe that's what she's meant to be, and she's like never been put in those positions, and she feels like she needs to take over. Because one of the things that's come out a lot is that she tried to take over like being more than an actor, which is the role that she was given, right? And I think that that's kind of this like also this like bossiness with having all these planets and they're close together. So I would say they're all conjunct together. It's not just that they're in the same sign, but that they're conjunct. So she's got a really true stellium working here, which can make her personality very one-sided. And so this can make for a powerful personality, but it can also make for someone who wants things in a specific way. And if she doesn't have that, it could be difficult. And it could also mean that people either really like her and or they don't. Now, when we see her human design, I'm gonna say that a lot of people are probably taken by her. They probably feel that she's very charismatic. And then we've got Moon in Virgo, which is actually a placement that I see very often in people who work in service-oriented fields, as well as people who have an affinity for being a healer or being really involved. Like this is the type of person who is usually very particular about their health or what they eat, or they're very in tune with those parts of their bodies, their physical bodies. And if they're not, then it generally brings in some issues for them. Now, she is a Leo rising as well. So this is important to talk about because Leo is the sign of fame, right? That's why we generally see in a lot of celebrities' charts that they have Leo degrees, which are 5, 17, and 29. Interestingly enough, all three of them have the 29th degree in their chart, which is particularly the fame degree. That's the one that we mostly see in a lot of major celebrities because it's a very powerful energetic degree on top of being a fame degree. which means that there is a lot of emphasis in this lifetime around that planet or point that's at 29 degrees, because it's kind of like about to move into the last degree, which would be the beginning of the next degree. And so it's kind of like a lot of learning has to be culminated, so there can be a sense of like crisis around it. And she has Jupiter at 29 degrees of Aries. Just something to note, you'll see that in not all celebrities, but definitely celebrities. And I also want to make a distinction between celebrities and actors, because there's a lot of really amazing actors out there who are not technically like celebrities, meaning they don't have these sorts of public feuds, and they're very private and we don't really hear much about them, which is, I'm assuming, what most actors, true artists dream of, is to be able to do what they love, make a lot of money, and create really beautiful art, but still have the private life, because that's something that fame does kind of strip from you, and that can be difficult for a lot of people. Um, I think for most of it. She also has her Juno at 29 degrees. I wouldn't say that's a major placement, but just interesting to note here. Um, she also has Juno in her seventh house, which makes her very, very committed in partnerships. So yeah, so what I was going to say though about the Leo rising is that Leo risings take up space. And I always talk about this with Leo risings, is that there is a tendency to be more polarizing, more so than Leo sun, or yeah, any other Leo placement, because Leo rising is like the way that you look. And so when you look, the way that you look is the sun and the lion. And she has very nice hair from what I've seen, and that's very like Leo. Having that mane is very important to them. And she has a hair care brand that kind of like tracks with all of that. Um, but it makes them shine, and they tend to not even, some of them may desire that, but even if they don't desire it, they're ruled by the sun. So it's kind of like given to them. And so this can make some people who don't like seeing others in the spotlight or like a lot of attention kind of feel weird about that, right? So you could see how like an Aquarius, for example, who is all about equality and just like, who do you think you are, would look at that and be like, hey, you really think you're special, don't you? And I just, as I said that, I just realized Justin Baldoni is a an Aquarius. But we'll get to his chart in a second. These are kind of like the main themes that I noticed. Okay, so what I wanted to say is, I mean, we could dissect this chart forever. I really don't want to do that though, honestly, because I kind of just want to, excuse me, I kind of just want to speak out the things that, because this isn't like a full birth chart reading. It's just more of a case study of what is happening, and yeah, what are the inherent personalities of the people involved. So, what is the second house that she has this conjunction in, that is an area of her life that is going to be very predominant and important for her? It's money, resources, material resources. It's your self-worth, it's your self-esteem, it's your value system, how you spend money, how you make money. And so when we see somebody who has not just a second house that's full, but a second house that's full in an earth sign, we see someone who is very practically and stability minded. Somebody who wants to make sure that they're secure financially. Now, Blake Lively is a Nepo baby. I didn't know that until very recently. But she is, her dad was an actor, I believe. And so this is something that is probably very important to her. And actually, I think yeah, that's something I also learned about her recently, was that she has kind of been given this, there's been rumors around her that she has tried to like climb the social ladder through really powerful men. She's like stood up for Harvey Weinstein, not necessarily stood up, but she kind of talked about how her experiences with him were very good. But then there was like stuff saying that she was involved with him when he was married. And then there's rumors, or not rumors, but she did speak out about Woody Allen in a positive light, which I don't believe he is somebody to be. I mean, you can separate the art from the man and say he makes great art, but to say that he's a good person or he's an empowering person or something, to me is like kind of difficult, because he's married to his stepdaughter and he's had allegations from his other stepdaughter, which may not be proven in the court of law, but the fact that he's married to his stepdaughter it kind of gives more credence to what the other stepdaughter is saying. But regardless, these men are very powerful, or were very powerful in Hollywood. And then Ryan Reynolds, of course. So she's definitely seeking stability and financial stability. That is something to just be aware of in this situation as well. The other thing that's interesting is all three of these people are slightly Virgo dominant. So she's obviously very Virgo dominant, but both Ryan and Justin are Virgo risings. So what's happening in Virgo right now? We have the South Node going through Virgo. Now, most of her planets, and I believe most of theirs as well, I think they're ascendant, yeah, 16 for Justin and 23. So Ryan Reynolds is gonna see it first. But the South Node is gonna go through all of their ascendants and then all of her planets. And what does the South Node demand of us? It demands that we strip away the aspects of that sign that are holding us back from our evolutionary purpose as a collective. This can be a difficult time for people who have South Node transiting if you have anything in Virgo. Now, what I say always helps is, and I have a video about this too, which goes more into the details about it, but what I say is that it helps to have a spiritual outlook when you are having South Node transits because it is generally a loss of things. How you experience that loss depends a lot on your own perspective. So for her, having it happen in the second house may be a loss of money, maybe a loss of finances. And we go through all these planets and say she could be losing emotional stability. She could be losing friendships. She could be losing her sense of self and her feeling of like purpose in the world. And so all these things, and it's not that it's a loss, but it's a loss of the aspects that are no longer in alignment. But like that's why I said it's very helpful to have a spiritual outlook. And I know that I don't know a ton about Justin Baldoni, but from what I do know, because I've seen him on like YouTube, he has a podcast. I don't know if he still has it, but he had one. And he does have a very spiritual outlook. I actually think he's Baha'i, which I'm Iranian, and they're like a marginalized group in Iran. But yeah, I'm pretty sure he has a very spiritual outlook. I'm not so sure about Blake and Ryan. I've never heard them talk about it, but that doesn't mean it's not there, right? But it does definitely help to have that. Yeah, she's having the South Node going through here, but she does have the North Node going in her eighth house during this time of Pisces, which is other people's money. And I can see this going a lot of ways. So she could be getting financial support from other people, but herself losing money. This is also could be that she's learning a lot about emotional intimacy and deep emotional bonds. Who knows what's going to happen between her and her husband? They've been together for a really long time. They have four kids. And so it takes a lot to kind of break up a couple like that. But Hollywood's weird. I call it Holly weird a lot. You can't set them to the same standards, especially like the famous people, like you can't set them to the same standards because they're quite interesting people in my opinion. And I'm not sure if that interesting is negative or positive. They're just interesting, which is what makes them really great case studies, right? Because it's like, wow, okay, we're seeing how this plays out. All right, I want to go into Justin now. So, as I said before, he is a Virgo rising and he's got a stellium in Scorpio. So does Ryan Reynolds, as we can see here. But we're going to see when we look at the human design that we actually will see kind of how different types of Scorpio can come out in people's charts. And you can probably see it through the astrology chart too, but I like to look at both of them. Now, the first thing I noticed is that he's got the sun in his sixth house, which is actually a good place to have the sun. It's not a bad place. The sixth house does better when there are malefics in it because it is a more difficult house of conflict and unequal partnerships. So like when you have Venus in the sixth house, for example, Venus likes balance and harmony, but the sixth house is about unequal partnerships. It's about service-oriented relationships. So it's inherently unequal. So Venus has a hard time there. But the sun says that he actually shines in conflict. And when there is conflict, it doesn't take away his power. It actually helps him grow in consciousness because the sun is conscious awareness. So a lot of people will say things like, I I don't feel like my sun sign. And there's a lot of reasons for that. But one of the reasons is that your sun is conscious awareness, whereas your moon is unconscious. So we naturally can gravitate towards our moon, but our sun takes conscious awareness to realize that part of ourselves. So that can be an aspect of why sometimes people don't feel like their sun sign. But yeah, so it brings conflict, brings him more consciousness. This could also explain why he's more spiritual of a person because the sixth house looks to the 12th, which is the house of Pisces, and it's a very, very spiritual house. But because when you have a planet in your sixth house, conflict tends to be a part of your life and can be quite difficult. And so people will often look to the opposing house of spirituality to bring some sense of meaning and purpose to that conflict. Okay. The other thing I noticed is he's got Sun conjunct Lilith. Now, Lilith is supposed to be Adam's first wife. And she is kind of like the rejected aspects of femininity, the things that Eve had that Lilith didn't, meaning that she's not subservient. Lilith is not subservient. She's very independent. And it's kind of those shamed feminine aspects of us. But it doesn't matter because men have feminine aspects as well. But what happens a lot, it's a very kind of like dark feminine energy. What can happen when your sun is conjunct Lilith is that there's a lot of projections onto you because people may find you very sexually attractive, like in a very visceral and primal way. And you may not be trying to be that way, but you can come off that way and people can project all sorts of like outcast sort of things onto you that may or may not actually be true. But this can invite in a lot of like darker energy from people because they sense your darkness within. Now, what he's doing with that darkness, in my opinion, is from what I've seen of him, is he does try to work with it. You know, he doesn't try to repress it. I'm sure he has at some points. He's talked about a lot about his addictions that he's had. This is kind of like, I can see that with this. Also with the moon in Scorpio, which is debilitated.
Hey guys, editing Jazz here. I wanted to say that as I was editing this, I noticed that Blake Lively also has Lilith about 9 degrees away from her ascendant. So everything I just said about Justin actually applies to Blake as well, and probably even more so because not only is she a woman and it's her feminine energy that gets this like kind of darkness to it and attracts everything I just talked about, but also it's on her ascendant. So it's what we see of her. Now, a lot of celebrities, what we see of them is actually their 10th house rather than their ascendant, but people around her and the way she looks through life kind of does have this dark feminine energy. And like I said about Justin, like this can make someone very sexually alluring to people. So I just want to mention that I saw that Blake had this as well. And when we look at our human design, you're going to see how maybe that comes out as well.
The moon doesn't like being in Scorpio. Scorpio is very dark and it's like when you moon in Scorpio, it's almost like a bottomless pit of emotions. And so they can really put a lot of emotions into what they do. Generally, these people tend to be very successful career-wise because career gives them a sense of because the thing is when moon is in Scorpio, it's almost like never satisfied. And so if you put that energy to business, they can be very successful in business because they're never going to just be like, this is enough. They're always going to be wanting more. They're always going to be wanting to grow and to bring more aspects in their work life. You can imagine though, in relationships, this can be quite difficult, right? Because some people don't want to be subject to that energy of like it's never enough for them and they just constantly want more and more emotions out of you and they're always searching deeper for more. Needless to say, Moon in Scorpio is one of my favorite placements. I love Moon in Scorpio people, and Moon in Capricorn is also debilitated. It's the other debilitation of Moon, and I also love Moon in Capricorn people. So, all moon signs deserve love. Okay, Ryan Reynolds has this too. He was actually born on eclipse, so that's a big energy. But yeah, Moon and Scorpio people deserve to be loved. Okay, so but it is definitely, especially because he's got Mars in Scorpio, which that's a beautiful placement, for going after what you want as well. But it's conjunct his moon, so it's like, wow, like that gives a lot of intense emotions, and then Mars just aggravates that even more. So it's even more intense there. And then he's got Pluto in Scorpio as well, which is the ruler of Scorpio. So he is quite an emotionally intense person. Yes. And then he's got Saturn. It's kind of loosely conjunct his moon, but it is more closely conjunct with Mars. Mars-Saturn conjunctions can be kind of difficult. They can be very good for and also Saturn and Scorpio in general. Saturn doesn't love being a Scorpio either. So yeah, the qualities of some of these placements are not the best, but that doesn't a an easy chart doesn't mean a good person, and a hard chart doesn't mean a bad person, and also doesn't mean equate to an easy or hard life. A lot of people with really easy charts, I don't even know what that means, but like great placements, everything's exalted, trines, all this stuff. A lot of them are super unhappy. So it's not that. Um, we sign up for different experiences in this life, right? When before we came, that's my opinion anyway. And so some people choose to have a more difficult spiritual life, and others are here to just like kind of more live on the material plane, which is also difficult, but more manageable in some ways. So I don't want to get into all that. But having Saturn Mars conjunction can be quite a harsh quality to how they move through the world. And it's often felt more internally as this energy of like, do I do it? Do I not do it? And it's a conjunction, so it's a blending of the energies rather than like an opposition where there would be like constantly going back and forth. But Mars conjunct Saturn can also bring like this tense quality in the body. And so these people tend to really benefit from doing things that kind of relax their bodies and their nervous systems because they tend to get like really tense about certain situations. Like, oh, it has to go this way, or it has to go like this. What I mentioned earlier, he also has a 29th degree. His Venus is at the 29th degree of Sagittarius. Venus in Sagittarius is an interesting placement, especially at the 29th degree. I think that's all he has, yeah. This is a fun-loving, freedom-loving person, especially when they're in their relationships. And I also want to say something. With both of these two being Virgo risings, Blake and the other party both feel that they can give something to each other. So for example, with Justin and Ryan, with the whole house, if we look at the whole house, all of Blake's planets fall into his first house. He has an understanding that Blake can help him. Blake can be beneficial for him. On the flip side, it means she has power in constructing his identity. And it can also make him feel quite good when you have somebody who has signs in the same placement as your ascendant. It can make you feel good. It kind of makes you feel like you're important, and they kind of highlight aspects about you that make you feel good. So Ryan would kind of have the same feeling, which is part of the reason he probably married her. Because you have to think, I mean, he definitely brings more money because he's very business oriented. He's very good at business, regardless of what you want to say about him. He's very good at business, and we'll see that in his human design chart. And second house people tend to be very good at business too, just saying. But yeah, it depends. Um, I actually let me see her. Yeah, no, she has a 2644. So yeah, that's a channel of marketing. But yeah, so he probably like I feel like when Blake and Ryan got together, they kind of made this like power couple. You know what I mean? And they're kind of like always together, which once again is kind of like a red flag to me, that he feels the need to like be involved in like all of her things and her with him. It's not bad. It's just to me, it's kind of red flaggy. Like I'm like, why can't you guys like every time Blake's on like a late show talk show or something, they like call Ryan and vice versa. It's just like it's very strange. I'm like, just do your own thing. I don't know. So regardless, they and when Justin and Ryan look at Blake, or when Blake looks at them, she sees them embody through their attitude and through their physical appearance and how they move through the world, all of the Virgo things that she really admires, right? So this is a really nice thing to have actually in synastry. Okay, so back to Justin. He's got the 29 degree Sagittarius Venus, so he's here to learn about relating to other people. He's here to learn. He's almost completing that lesson, you know? And I just realized he's got Neptune at 0 degrees. 0 degrees is another anaretic degree. It brings out the more positive aspects of that planet, though, and that sign. So this to me tells me that like his, and I know he's kind of like this feminist person, but you can kind of see that as someone who's being very in touch because Capricorn is a more, it's not really a masculine, but it rules father and authority figures. And Neptune being here at 0 degrees means that, which Neptune is a very, very feminine sign, means that he is like, yeah, he's very attuned to to the feminine, and trying to extract that from like power because Capricorn can have that like sense of authority, you know? And so I could definitely see that feminist quality here. He really tries to bring, and Neptune is very spiritual too. So at 0 degrees, that could be like where his spirituality comes from as well. But yeah, Venus at 29 degrees in Sagittarius, he's here to learn a lot about and have crises within relating to other people. And because it's Venus, Venus technically usually rules women in our lives. So he's here to learn by relating with women. He also has the South Node in the fourth and the North Node in the 10th, which means that he has a lifetime or many lifetimes of being, yeah, and he's got Venus in the fourth. There's a lot of things about like this is like the women in his life, the mother, and this is the father and the public life, and this is like inner world. And so I could him wanting to bring light to like domestic violence and all of these like women's issues makes sense to me with this access. But he's here to have a really public life, you know, and he's here to go after what he wants and not just dwell in his home life. It's not about, that's kind of what in past lifetimes he might have done. And this time around, it's more about his public life, his career. So it doesn't mean he can't have a good private life. It looks like, you know, him and his wife have been married for a while. They have children. It seems like they have a good marriage. Who knows? But it seems like he does well here and he's learning more about the public life, which is kind of what's happening through this is that, you know, if you want to grow in your public life, it's showing you that there are some lessons here. And like I said earlier, he's got the North Node in his seventh house right now. So does Ryan, which means that the relationships in his life and other people seem to be very powerful right now, and you're feeling like you don't have as much power or that you are losing aspects of yourself. Now, for him and Blake specifically, it's not going to be until like 2026 when they start really feeling the acute effects of this. For Ryan, it's a little bit sooner because he's got the 23 degrees, and I believe right now the North Node is at, I think I have the transits here. The North Node is at 28 degrees, yeah. So it's gonna get there pretty soon. So yeah, this is a very intense person emotionally, very, very, very intense. Um, Scorpio is also a sign of sexuality. So like kind of what I said about this, and he's talked about, like I said, his previous addiction and problems like that. And his stellium is in the third house of communication and in some ways media. And this kind of makes sense. He has a podcast, right, where he talks a lot about certain things. It's a lot more about communicating ideas and teaching and learning. Yeah, and then the fourth house, he's got a lot of planets as well. And then he's got 3 planets in the fifth, which is a house of creativity. So it's like he's here to be really creative and to work hard with the sun in the sixth, and then like and put it out there, usually in spoken or written forms. And obviously he does film, so that can also be creative as well. But when I see the third house, it tells me that he really likes to talk. He's outspoken. There's more of like an extrovert, even though he's a Virgo rising, which tends to be more introverted. He's not, he definitely has a lot of ideas and he wants to share them. Yeah, especially with Mercury in the fifth, like he wants to talk about his creative ideas. Yeah, is there anything else I want to say about him? Okay, let's go into Ryan Reynolds. I'm sure if there's anything else. Actually, if you see anything else that you think is really prominent, let me know. Because obviously, like I said, I'm trying to kind of just go through this because we have a lot to go through. And if you guys want, I can do another case study on them. Like I said, I plan on doing more of these. I was going to do them on different people, but I can do it again on this if you guys feel the need. But I plan on this being very comprehensive. Okay, so now we're into Ryan Reynolds. Okay. So he's a Virgo rising, and he's, like I said, got a stellium in the third house as well of Scorpio. Now, he has the North Node on his sun and moon, which means he was born during a solar eclipse. Now, who else was born on eclipses? Donald Trump, he was born on a lunar eclipse. Prince William, I believe Prince Charles, somebody else. It's happens at least, I think there's two people in the royal family currently that were born on eclipse. And there's some other people as well, obviously, that are famous. But when you are born on an eclipse, this is a very powerful, faded life energy. And like it's a very powerful force. Because you have to think, everything I was saying earlier about people with like the sun and moon get this like Aries-like quality to move towards what they want. Now you've got the North Node, which amplifies everything, right? And gives this kind of like embracing quality. And it's almost like obsessive a little bit. It's never settled. It kind of feels like that, what I was saying, like Moon and Scorpio vibes, kind of gives that same kind of energy. It's never settled. It's always wanting more because this is the North Node is like where we're growing in this lifetime, right? Or we are trying to evolve into. And so when it's conjunct certain planets, we feel this like, oh yeah, I'm supposed to be out there in the world. I'm supposed to be out there doing different things and really taking action in this part of my life. So for him, it's the third house as well. And the third house can be creativity as well, but it is more spoken communication. He's got Mars here, so it can make his communication style quite aggressive, which is something that I've always picked up on. I feel like he's always like angry. I don't know, even his like when he makes jokes, I just his style is quite aggressive for me. Uh and all of this is conjunct once again. So it's not like from 0 to 9 degrees. It's not even just in the same house, it's conjuncting each other. So sun, moon, so his emotions, exact conjunction. Moon Rahu, Rahu's the Vedic term for North Node. So I sometimes say that because it's easier to say than North Node. Moon Rahu, as somebody, yours truly, who has them in the same sign, and they're not conjunct, they're actually, yeah, they're not conjunct, but I have them in the same sign. And I already feel the effects of this, okay? So when you have this close to each other, man, the emotional life is extremely turbulent. It is extremely turbulent and it's extremely obsessive. Now, I mentioned earlier about having control issues, and I think that this definitely it's a little bit more difficult for women, but for men too, because men have a tendency to repress more of their emotional side because of just cultural society and how we've brought them up. And so it gets really hard when you have this. Also, the moon and Venus are females. So this to me tells me that there is control issues around women. And we see that with a lot of the things that have been said about Ryan Reynolds over the years. And also, Sun conjunct Rahu means he is like trying to figure out his purpose in this world. He's not giving up. He's constantly moving towards trying to make himself conscious of what his purpose is, what his soul's purpose is. And this can also bring like a big sense of an ego as well. And then you've got Uranus here in Scorpio, and then Mars in Scorpio, which like I said, this is a great placement. This is another thing that's interesting about celebrities. And, as I do more of these case studies, I think you'll start seeing this is that a lot of celebrities, remember, not actors, not just actors, but celebrities, have a lot of Scorpio or Pluto, or have a lot of Pluto influence in their charts. But Mars in Scorpio means you go after what you want. Like, and it's not like, because Mars is one of the rulers of Scorpio. So Mars is kind of at home here. But there's an emotional intensity when you go after what you want as well. So they tend to be very effective in getting what they want. He, like Justin, has Venus in Sagittarius. So this is interesting because we're talking about all this like emotional issues. But when it comes to like, because Venus is our relational aspect, the moon is our deep emotional needs and security. So on a very deep level, I do think that he has a lot of instability and insecurity emotionally, which can lead to a controlling person. Doesn't have to, but it can. Whereas with Venus in Sagittarius here makes his less emotionally attached relationships, very fun loving. Same with Justin, right? This is like his interpersonal style with people. So not like probably his home life. But I mean, it does denote your partner as well, but this is just less emotional than the moon, right? So we're talking about something that like friends as well. And so he tends to give a lot of freedom there and he likes to have fun, right? Venus in a fire sign is about having fun and exploring with people. So maybe he likes to do fun things with his friends and travel and explore and yeah, it's definitely gives a different quality to Venus when you add the fire into it. His Saturn is in Leo, which can give problems with a father figure. Just putting that out there. And for a man, that can be actually, that is so interesting. I think he did have issues with his father. I think he did have issues with his father. He may have experienced his father as being very harsh, controlling, authoritative. But it's not really playing a significant role in his. So he doesn't really have a Saturnian influence, right? Like if you have like Saturn in the seventh, you might go for a significantly younger, older man. But if it's a pattern with a man generally, and they're always younger, which is Ryan Reynolds, he like Scarlett Johansson is like 8 or 9 years younger. I know he was with Alanis Morissette. They might have been closer in age. I'm not sure. Blake Lively. I don't know all of his stuff, but I'm not saying this is Ryan Reynolds, but this is just for women out there. If a man, like the first person I think of is Scott Disick. Oh, by the way, 29 degrees Jupiter, 29 degrees Taurus. Remember, Blake Lively had it 29 degrees of Jupiter as well, but it was in Aries. Scott Disick comes to mind, like him always dating, and Leo DiCaprio always dating younger women. It's like, yeah, there is like a looks aspect to that, of course, but also you have to think like, why can they not relate to women their age? You know, a lot of times, not always, a lot of times, like I said, if there's a pattern there, younger women are more gullible, right? Like I know myself when I was younger, I was definitely more gullible. As I get older, I start learning myself more and I start having more boundaries around certain things. And when I was younger, it was definitely a lot easier to control me, you know? So especially if someone's older and is more powerful, has more money, or is just older than you and you feel like they have more authority over you. Let me see if there's anything else I want to say. Oh, yeah. So this Saturn that's in his 12th house, this can also actually signify like the loss of a father figure, um, either emotionally or physically, like younger at a younger age, or emotionally he was absent because the 12th house dissolves things. So he may have felt like his dad, like one thing I could see is like he may have felt like his dad wasn't like an actual role model for him as a father. He may have seen him as very stern and authoritative, but or it could honestly be that yeah, he may have seen him that way, but he didn't see him as like a role model, as a male role model. And so emotionally, maybe he was absent, but he was very stern and authoritative in the home. There's so many possibilities here, right? And someone who has Venus in the fourth wants stability and harmony in the home. So if the father like disrupted that in any way, then that could be difficult for him to deal with. Is there anything else I want to say about him? I think that's it. Yeah. I also want to say, like, one thing you can see is him and Justin both have their midheavens in Gemini, and their jobs both involve communication, right? Ryan in multiple ways because he owned Mint Mobile, which he sold. He's got great business acumen, which is somewhere where he's transforming in this lifetime with Pluto in the second. But we see him as being quite mercurial, right? Very witty and involved in media. And with Justin, I think it comes more across that he is kind of like easy to talk to. He has a podcast, so he's like using communication. And also when you're in movies, you're using communication as well. It's not just like videos. Okay, now we're gonna get into the human design aspect of things, okay? So obviously we're not gonna look at everything, but we're gonna look at some things. First things I look at is her profile. She is a 2-4. The four always has some level of influence over their networks. So over the people, their social groups. And the two is called the Hermit, but I think it's more of like a natural. Um, the two does live in the projection field. Actually, interestingly, they all live in the projection field. He is a 5-1, and Justin Baldoni is a 3-5. So fives and twos they live in the projection field, but they live in it very differently. And with Blake, I'm not going to go into it as much, but with Justin and Ryan, I will, because the five is a very interesting number. I actually have a video on fives because it's my favorite number in profiles. I don't say my favorite, but it's my favorite to learn about. And it's very powerful, but with great power comes great responsibility, right? The twos tend to live in the projection field, but what happens is people tend to look at them and see what they're really good at and then call them in to do those things. So it's less, I don't say it's less powerful, but it doesn't carry as much responsibility and weight that the five carries. So what this tells me about her though is that she comes across to a lot of people as just like everything's so easy for her. Or she's just like natural at everything, and she just seems to make everything look so easy and glamorous and nice and harmonized. And that she has, like I said, pretty good support from her social networks. And that's something that happens for her because this line right here is unconscious. So it's not something that she can really consciously control. She can control how easy things come up a little bit because it's a projection field, not always. But the four is like she naturally just draws people to her. And she also has the channel of charisma. Sorry, my face is blocking it. But these are her channels here. She has the channel of charisma, initiation, surrender, and rhythm. Now, two of these I want to really talk about. Well, actually, I want to talk about three of them. Well, actually, I want to talk about all of them. Okay, so before we get to the channels, one thing I want to say. This is all over the place, but this is how my mind works. She has the incarnation cross of the sleeping phoenix. Now, I have a video on my channel about the global cycle mutation that we're going to have in 2027. There is a 400 and some odd change cycle, collective cycle that is ending in 2027 and a new one that's beginning. The one that's beginning is the sleeping phoenix. The sleeping phoenix is about doing what you love. It's about doing what you love, whereas the previous 400 some odd years has been about organizations helping us, about helping the tribe through, I was gonna say through planning because it's called the cross of planning, but it's like really helping the tribe through services. So like you going and finding what you're good at and then offering it to the tribe as a service to help other people. Whereas now, starting in 2027, it's not gonna happen immediately. Watch my video on that if you want more information. It's gonna take a long time. But it's a beginning of us doing what we want to do, not doing it because we want to be of service, doing it because it fulfills us, and being very present in the now because it includes the channel of charisma 2034, which this is called the channel of charisma because these people can be very charismatic. Do you know why? Because they are very much in the now. They are very present people. They are very, and for her, this is unconscious, but it's her unconscious sun and earth. But still, it's unconscious, so she may not necessarily know that she does this, but she naturally draws people to her because she's so charismatic and present in the moment. I just thought about how I recently heard something that didn't make sense about her that just made sense to me now. I guess like Leighton Meester. I never watched Gossip Girl, so I'm not sure of that. But I throughout this process I've seen that Leighton Meester and Blake Lively weren't friends, and that actually I guess like the creator of the show or someone from the show, like the creator or director or something said that Blake and Leighton is very introverted or something, and she would just like go to her room or whatever trailer. And Blake was just like always talking about this or that and like what's happening now. And I feel like he said something about her being very present. And it was like kind of like vague and I didn't understand it. And I was like, what? What does that mean? But now, because the way he said it was kind of weird, but now I'm thinking this is what he was picking up on. Anyway, so the fact that she is here to embody the sleeping phoenix means that she's here to do what lights her up in the now, in the moment. And she's here to kind of embody that. Okay, I'm gonna get to the channels, but I also want to say this situation right here, I have never seen a will center that has all four of these defined. Now, what is the will center? The will center is the ego. It is our will to get things done in a certain way. It is a motor center, so it gives a little bit of energy, but it's not really as big as the sacral, so it's not really meant to like sustain us. But what what I would say, someone who has all four of these on here, which I've never seen personally, I'd love to hear if you guys have seen it, if you guys do human design charts, is that this person has a very distinct way of expressing her ego. And to her, her ego is important. So, you hear all these people calling her a narcissist. This is probably what they're feeding off of. And by the way, I don't like using that word. I will say people have narcissistic tendencies, but I think narcissist is way overused um to say someone is a narcissist, like I feel like that's yeah, I mean it's a spectrum as well, but this is what people are picking up on in my opinion is that this is a person this to me correlates a lot of that second house stuff about self-esteem, self-worth, self-value because this is the part of our chart that gives us self-worth. So this is actually 70 or 65% of the population of the charts that people have in the database. 65% have this completely open. So only 35% have it defined. And not she doesn't only have it defined, but she has it defined in every single gate. Meaning that she has a defined sense of self-worth. She kind of has, she believes she's worth something, and that's the way she wants herself to be treated and to come across. This is what I'm worth. This is what I can offer you. And this kind of like, that whole like text message she sent about her being Khaleesi, which is like, I can't imagine ever saying something like that. And I have a defined will center too. Not like this, but I have a defined will center. And most of the clients I attract do not have a defined will center, but I'm gonna talk about that in a second because Justin has a completely open will center. So does that mean he has no self-worth? Well, we'll talk about it. But I attract a lot of people who have undefined will centers because they sense that I have some level of strength when it comes to my self-worth. Now, it doesn't mean in every aspect of my life, but I have some level of strength there. And so they're kind of like, I want to learn from this person. If you are open here or undefined, I talk about that in another video, the difference between open and undefined. Um, then you are here to get really, really wise about that center. So as you can see, Justin has three open, completely open centers: his head, his ego, his will, and his solar plexus, his emotions. So he's here to be very wise in this lifetime and to learn a lot about this. So actually, these people, when they're operating on a higher frequency, can be very wise about self-worth. Whereas you have to understand Blake, she has very set ways. So if people don't treat her the way she thinks she deserves to be treated, she's not wise about it like he would be. She is like, treat me this way. I'm worth this. You treat me this way, which, like I said, correlates to the second house where she has a stellium. So this is very, very interesting to me. Okay. So let's talk about some just briefly. So channel of charisma I talked about being in the now. Channel of initiation, if we even think about the fact that this goes from the G center, which is your direction in life, into her will center, it means that she likes to assert her will onto like she likes to assert her own direction in things. And so this can be quite polarizing, right? Because she's like, I want things this way. Then she's got the channel of surrender, which is very keen for marketing. So she's unconscious, but this is the design of somebody who can have the ability to market themselves in a certain way. But once again, because it's unconscious, she can't really control it. She doesn't recognize that she is doing it or that maybe she doesn't even realize how important it is to her because it's so deeply embedded in her body and she doesn't have conscious access over it. So this is probably why when she was getting bad press, she got really, really upset because she's like, no, this isn't, I know how, like, this isn't right. Like, I should know how to market myself. And then she got a channel of rhythm, which I live with someone who has the channel of rhythm. Okay. And I will tell you this. I told my boyfriend this once and he'll never let me forget it. Is I told him, I was like, you have a really strong aura and it pulls me into your rhythm. It's called the channel of rhythm. These people have a very distinct way of doing things. And when you're around them, they pull you into their way of doing things. And so my boyfriend always will tell me now whenever I say something, he's like, it's not my fault. I just have a really big aura. I'm like, dang it, I should have never told you that. But as we'll see, Justin has that only partially. So she wins in this sense, right? She overpowers his desire to have his own rhythm. And Ryan Reynolds has it as well. So Blake wins when it comes to timing and rhythm in that sense. That she has her way of doing things at her on her timing. And yeah, it's hard to, and I've heard a lot of stories about her coming out like that on set, she's like really difficult to work with. And I wonder if this is why, because some people are like, I don't want to be pulled into your rhythm. But it's kind of hard to resist, especially when you're in her aura. Okay, is there anything else I want to say? One thing I want to say about all three of them is none of them have their solar plexus defined, which is our emotional center. So these people all have the ability to, instead of feeling into their emotions first, they tend to first amplify the emotions around them. And they are here to learn how to be wise about their emotions. Okay. And so neither of them can really um give a lot of strength there, right? Because Ryan is completely open and so is, oh, I just noticed he's completely open. When people have a completely open emotional center, they have a lot of ability to gain wisdom and learn about emotions because when they're moving through this on a lower frequency, what they do is if you, let's say I come to you and I have a defined solar plexus, so I'm defined here, and I come to you and I say, "Hey, I'm really sad." Someone who has a completely open solar plexus, who is on a lower frequency, has not gotten wise about it, will amplify that and be like, oh, you're just always sad and it's always me, and they personalize it. So you have to think like Ryan and Justin may take things really personally at times. Now, depends on the frequency because like I said, if they're working on a higher frequency, then they can be very wise. And if you are somebody like me who is emotional and I come and I say, "Hey, I'm really emotional," they can actually walk me through gaining clarity over my emotions. But yeah, it's hard to say if these people have achieved that, without knowing them directly. Which is why in reading, it's really cool to have people's own input, right? Like even when people just write to me and they say, like I say, in depth, explain what you're getting a reading for, and I like you to be in depth. Part of that reason is because through your words, I can get certain and you may not even be thinking about it. You're just like randomly typing, but that even tells more because you're not consciously saying things. You're just kind of saying what comes to mind. And it gives me a lot of information about how you think about things, right? So that's why it's cool to have. I love just listening to people and observing them for to have longer sessions, which is kind of why I'm redoing my readings right now because I just think it's so much more powerful. You can do it, but it's more powerful. I think any practitioner will agree with that. That is much more powerful to at least see somebody two or three times to get a good sense or have a lot of contact with them in some other way, to get a good sense of like what they are bringing and how they are thinking about things, right? Because if I have a 60-minute reading, I don't get to observe you as much, right? Because I'm giving you a lot of information in that 60 minutes. So regardless, that was aside. Okay, let's talk about Justin. Justin is a 3-5, and the 3-5 is a martyr heretic. This is, in my opinion, the hardest profile to have, and it's mine. Yay! But Ra Uruhu, the guy who channeled Human Design, he often talked about how difficult this was. And when he lived on Ibiza, and when he said when he first moved there, he noticed that the outcasts were all 3-5s. And the reasoning for this is plenty. And I'm gonna at some point do a video about martyr heretics because yeah. But the 3 is the masters of the Maya and the martyr, and the 5 is the heretic. So as soon as you see martyr, I don't really like these words, I'm gonna be honest with you, but you see martyr and you're like, that doesn't sound fun, and the heretic, it's like, that doesn't sound fun either. I say heretic and heretic, okay? So I'm just gonna go back and forth between the two. The 5 is in the projection field. Now, we're not gonna get super into the projection field, but it means that people project onto you, and no one really knows who you are. Even if you try to show them, because you're in a projection field. So even if you're like being completely honest with how you feel, no one really gets an accurate picture of you. Now, you could say that this is something that we do. I practice and study Jungian psychology. So projection is something that we all do and have. But what our chart shows us is what is more powerful for you maybe than others, right? And so for these people who have fives in their profile, projections are really, really strong and they feel them and they guide their lives in very important ways. Whereas someone who is a 1-3 would not have that same impact. You got to look at the whole chart because you got to look at all of the lines. But yeah, generally, no. And we're going to talk about Ryan Reynolds being a 5-1. You know who's also a 5-1 is Taylor Swift. It's very different to have the 5 in the conscious position versus the 5 in the unconscious position because Justin cannot control his projections. Ryan, to some extent, can. Taylor can't, which is why, I'm sorry to say, but I'm not a Swiftie. Kind of have always had a similar vibe with Taylor Swift that I had with Ryan Reynolds. And I'm like, I don't get it. Like, I just don't see it. But what they've both powerfully done, because I can not like Taylor Swift and I can still say she's very successful, like clearly very successful. And same with Ryan, right? What fives can do is they can curate a projection. They have conscious control over that projection. So they can curate an image much better. Justin cannot use that 5 consciously. He has to live with it unconsciously, knowing that people are always going to project certain things. Remember that Sun Lilith I was talking about? He has this feeling that people always project these things onto him that he's not actually he isn't actually, but he can't do it. The other thing about fives, both no matter where they are, fives are very seductive, okay? So they call this like the placement of the seducer and the seduced. And when it's conscious, though, like Taylor Swift and Ryan, they can feel that sense of seduction in a way and consciously use it. Whereas Justin cannot. So it may get really fuzzy there in the sense that people may feel like he's being seductive and he's like not, depending on how they're feeling about him. Okay. So it can get really weird there. The 3 has a hard life as a personality. I'm not going to lie to you. If you have a 3 in your personality specifically, you're here to literally just like be a failure. And there's a reason for that. But that's how it feels to you often, is that you make a ton of mistakes, you never achieve expectations, but what you're here to do, especially as a 3-5 specifically, is that you're here to make the mistakes. You're here to do all the things, experience life. And he's got channel 35, which is really about wanting to experience everything in life that life has to offer, like just running into experiences. And that's that moon Mars that he has in his chart as well. So he's someone who runs into life head first. Like, yes, I want to, because he wants the experience of it. And in that process, he makes a lot of errors. And because of that, some people may look at him and be like, "Oh, yeah, like he's just always screwing things up, you know? But what happens in that process is these people find out what doesn't work. And as a 5, you're meant to universalize things. So you find out what doesn't work, and then you go into the world and you say, hey, I did all of this stuff. I'm going to tell you guys what works and what doesn't work. And so you're kind of like a guide in that way, and you have a lot of experience to back up your wisdom. And so this is a very important placement for society, but it's not easy to have. Another person who I can think of always on the top of my head who has this is Kim Kardashian. Yeah. Okay. So he's a 3-5. Another thing I want to mention, 3-5s inherently have no sway. I don't say no sway, have limited influence on their immediate circle. They do really well with strangers. So that really contrasts with Blake, who does really well with the people who know her. He doesn't. 3-5s inherently have a hard time, which is why they have difficulty growing up when they're growing up. And like I said, I'm a 3-5, so I'll tell you right now, is because they feel inherently that they don't influence the people closest to them. And so it feels like they're often being betrayed a lot. And it's not, and the other person may not be wanting to betray them, but like if it's between a 3-5 and a 2-4 in the immediate network, it's very likely that a lot of people are going to pick the 4 because the 4 has influence over their network. So, am surrounded by 4/6s. My partner's a 4/6, a lot of my friends are 4/6s. I just tend to get along with 4/6s really well. And it's very different, right? These people, I have more influence over strangers, people who don't really know me. Uh, but yeah, they have more influence over the people that know them. So, see if there's anything else. Okay, so he's got the channel of the struggle and channel of preservation. So channel of preservation is very like leadership like quality. Ryan Reynolds has this as well. But his is conscious and Justin's is unconscious. But what Justin does have consciously is this channel of struggle. Now I have half of this. So having the full one is actually kind of cool. It goes from the spleen to the root. So this means that he has instinctual awareness about what causes are worthy of fighting for, and he has the desire to act on it. So this is very much giving me like social justice warrior vibes a little bit. It doesn't have to be like that, but it's like wanting to fight for something. He wants to go out there and fight for something, and in doing so, he leads people, he leads society and the collective into having a better understanding of life. And so this to me is very much like Moon Mars and even like Mars Saturn, like or Moon Mars Saturn, they're all together for him. Is he wants to like have a cause that he fights for and it's very important for him. And he feels like because he's got the full channel, he knows instinctively because this spleen is our instincts. He knows what to fight for instinctively. And then he has the pressure to fight for it. I already talked about him having a 5 and him feeling like overpowered by Blake for sure. Oh, yes. So Justin has a completely open ego, completely open will center compared to her fully defined one. This means actually she could learn a lot from him. If he's in the high frequency, this means that he has probably suffered from low self-worth a lot in his life, whereas Blake has always kind of had a defined sense of worth. But I will say, just because you have something defined doesn't mean that you are the healthy expression of it at all, at all. Because this, like I said, this could mean that if she's operating from the unhealthy, Ra has even said that if you have a center that's defined and you are working through the unhealthy aspect of it, the unhealthy frequency, it can be more hurtful than someone who has open. So for example, I'll tell you this, like I have a defined ego. So you would think, oh, Jazz, like self-worth. She just like has always known her self-worth. In one way, yes. And in a lot of other ways, I have actually struggled a lot with my self-worth. And that's something that when I meet people who have an open ego center, which like I said, is a lot of people, most people don't have this open. They don't necessarily have it completely open, but they maybe have it like Ryan, like they have one or like one here. But when they have it completely open, Ross says what happens with people who have any completely open centers, which he has 3, is that they, in a past life, completely mastered this area. But in this life, they are very prone to being conditioned because they don't have strength in this lifetime. And so what happens is other people condition you. And so you start having all sorts of self-worth issues that aren't really yours. But when you get down to yourself and when you really do the deconditioning work, you realize that you actually are very wise and you recognize how to use self-worth in a healthy way. Whereas for her, she doesn't have much room to budge, right? But she could learn a lot from somebody like Justin, who's very flexible with self-worth. Like, hey, sometimes you got to give, sometimes you got to take, sometimes you got to, lay down and say, you know what, it's not worth it. And we're gonna, it doesn't mean that I'm not worthy, but it's, like he's got more wisdom around it. One thing I also want to say, when you have undefined solar plexus, like all 3 of these do, this is your emotional center, these people don't like conflict. So they can be very passive aggressive and they can avoid conflict at all costs. So this is kind of like a situation which happens in which like no one really spoke to each other about what was actually happening and then instead just went and like filed lawsuits and did all this stuff, And honestly, I'm not trying to be like super objective here. I'm just trying to, because I'm a subjective person, and I already told you I don't like Ryan Reynolds. But I'm not sitting here and saying like Ryan Reynolds sucks. But before I even looked at their chart, my initial instinct was like, I felt like Ryan and Blake, but I don't know. I feel like it's Ryan because there was an article that came out that said that he and I don't know if it's true, but he wanted to buy the rights from Justin, and Justin for it ends with us so that they could do like a sequel or something or a prequel, and Justin said no. But what I heard was that there is a morality clause when you buy rights, like that's very standard, industry standard. And one of the, I guess someone like it was a source or something said that one of the morality clauses when Justin bought the rights to Colleen Hoover's book, that one of them was that he could not have anything because of the nature of like what they are talking about, that he couldn't have anything that makes him look like he SA'd someone or SH someone or was like harassing people like that. So it's very interesting that they chose that specifically. And listen, I don't know the truth, man. I don't, nobody knows. From what I've read, Justin has disproven or brought a lot of doubt to a lot of her claims. So that's not good for her, right? Because sometimes, especially in those situations, we don't have proof. This is the way it happens. Like as a woman who has been in those situations, we don't always have proof. That's just unfortunately what it is. And it sucks because, but if the other side has proof that disproves you or brings doubt to your credibility, that's when you start having issues, in my opinion. Yeah. And yeah, the conflict thing, that's what I was talking about, is that they like none of them talked it out. They just like um went to straight to like lawsuits and having issues. But yeah, I don't know exactly what I was saying. Okay, I don't know. So let's just go into Ryan Reynolds. Okay. As I said, he's a 5-1, which means that he has conscious control to some degree over his projections, and so does Taylor Swift. So they make you see what they want you to see. And they're very powerful at that. They're very good at doing that, about curating something for you. And so you get this sense that you don't really know them. And what I've always said about Taylor Swift and why I think she's so successful is partially because she is kind of like this blank canvas. She doesn't really give us a lot of information about herself. So you're able to project onto her a lot of your own ideas, and in doing so, you kind of can just assume whatever you want about her. And so then you like her because you're just like, oh, I think she's like this, you know? And so maybe me not liking her is my own projections. You know what I mean? Like, who knows? And it's not that I don't like her. I don't like her music. Like, I don't like her music. And yeah, I do get kind of like a mean girl vibe from her, which 5-1s can sometimes give that off. They don't, fives, when you have a 5 in your conscious profile, you don't come across generally super friendly. Just gonna say that. Like there is and I feel that way about Taylor. Like even though she's got a moon in Cancer, I believe, she comes across very sweet in a lot of ways, but also like very powerful. Like like you don't want to mess with Taylor, you know. So that's kind of the power, like that what they give off with the 5 is like, yeah, I'm powerful, I'm strong. This is 5 is a very powerful number to have that in your conscious control. Now, guys, remember I said in the beginning of this video that I was like, why do I not like Ryan Reynolds? Well, I have a completely open spleen center. Okay. No gates activated on my spleen, which is this baby right here. So I'm here to have a lot of wisdom around health, around intuition, around awareness. I'm here to, yeah, just feel, I'm here to have a lot of wisdom around fear and, what to be afraid of, what not to be afraid of. But it's also an area that I'm very easily conditioned. So it goes a lot of ways. I need more time to talk about that kind of stuff. And like I said, I have a video that I talk about open and undefined and defined centers as well. But when I saw this, I was like, well, no wonder. I am somebody who does not operate out of fear. I mean, okay, hold on. That's not a that was my ego talking. I am somebody who does not like to operate out of fear. Of course I operate out of fear. Oh my God, we all do. The awareness centers, which is the spleen, the ajna, and the solar plexus, are awareness centers, right? They all are associated with certain fears. So most of us have at least one of those gates defined, and so are going to have some sort of fears. The spleen is the oldest and the most primal of the awareness centers. It's the one that we share with all animals. Animals don't have the ajna. according to human design, which is how to conceptualize ideas and thoughts. And this is gives us our awareness or our possibility for consciousness, like being like aware that we have thoughts. Animals, according to human design, don't have that. They just have this like primal instinctual awareness that's very like physically motivated. And then the solar plexus is the most powerful of the three. This is the weakest. Spleen is the weakest. Emotional is the strongest, but it's the newest. And I have a video about this too. This is one that the awareness has not been integrated into society yet. So we don't really, a lot of us don't understand how to work with the emotional body. And that is why we have so many like chronic health diseases, and I did too, and I healed them. And so it's very important part of my path, but this is part of the reason why we're having so many issues because the solar plexus is connected to your nervous system. So he has all of these channels, I'm not channels. He does have two channels, conscious channels, from his life force energy, which is sacral, to his instinctual awareness. So this man just has instincts, moves on them, has instincts, moves on them very quickly. And the thing is with the spleen, the fears of the spleen can be resolved really only through taking action. So when you look at somebody who has all except one of these, he is somebody who is constantly feeling a fear and then having to move it through him physically, taking action, right? So he's got the alpha channel, the alpha, very leadership oriented, based on his guidance, based on his direction. Channel of power, 3457, straight from the life force to the spleen. So instinctual awareness. I mean, these are both very powerful. When I was doing a little bit of research for this, I saw this article about how somebody said a few months ago that Ryan Reynolds has gotten like super controlling on set. He has like a multimedia marketing agency now, and we're comparing him to Tom Cruise, that he's just like kind of like wants to take over everything, which kind of gives more credence like what people are saying about him and Blake wanting to take over uh this set from Justin. And Justin being a very open person, feeling quite overpowered by this power couple's energy and money, and finances and power. They have a lot of power. Specifically, in my opinion, Ryan. And I mean, you could say that even monetarily, right? And this to me, when somebody has this many defined gates on their spleen, they are very in tune with their awareness. I'm sorry, with their instincts and with intuition. And how they choose to use that instinct and intuition is up to them, right? It can be lower or higher frequency. But when somebody has very good instincts and the ability to respond to them immediately with a sacral, this is business acumen, right? This is someone who would be very, very good at business, and he makes very good business decisions. I would say, this one may have not been, but in terms of how he's built his net worth, which is supposed to be like hundreds of millions of dollars, he knows business, man. He knows business. And I actually should have looked at Taylor Swift's chart because I wonder what her chart looks like. Because once again, this is not like if you have like me, okay, I have a small business. I don't have any gates here. Does it mean I can't do business? No. What this just shows is this person has a lot of power and strength there. And number one, it doesn't have to be in business, but if they wanted to get in business, they could be very instinctual there. And him and Blake together have this. The whole channel, oh yeah, that's a compromise. So that might actually bring some issues into the relationships, that like he wants to do things a certain way based on instinct, and she will be like, no, like I was gonna say no, babe. I was like really into being Blake, but saying like, no, that's not the way to do it. And he might get frustrated with that. I do think that in their relationship, her being very service oriented, I do think that I don't know. I do think that he comes off to me as very controlling. And there's been, like I said, things about him that he always wanted a wife that just like stayed at home, took care of the kids, and that, yeah, he kind of like took over, he likes to take over a lot of things. Like he took over a lot of the marketing for It Ends With Us. Like he was doing interviews on set, and it's just like very strange. And like I said, with that moon conjunct Rahu, could give a lot of like insecurity emotionally and feeling like no matter how much Blake gives him, it's not enough. And to be fair, there are rumors that him and Blake met on a set when he was still married and that they started dating while Ryan was still married to Scarlett Johansson. So maybe because he's done it and now his best friend, Hugh Jackman, just left his wife of like 20 something years for his co-star on that musical. So maybe Ryan saw, that maybe there was nothing there. Maybe there was. None of us will ever know. But maybe Justin was like, nah, man, I don't like this. Maybe he heard the way that, Justin Baldoni has a way of speaking, which you could have your opinions on it. It seems like it's very like personal, like he's very like, and these celebrities, I don't know, I just don't, like I said, I don't think they're very like spiritually connected. And I feel like Justin is more spiritually connected and he has a lot more attention within, he's got the multi-planet square between his sun and Aquarius and his Pluto and Moon and Mars and Saturn. So he's got a lot of tension internally. So generally when we have tension internally, it is an impulse, especially with squares, for us to grow. And so it's not easy. We can't just move forward all the time because something's always struggling with us. People who don't have as many difficult aspects like squares and oppositions tend to just kind of like bulldoze their way over people and things more often and not be as self-aware. And like I said, both Blake and Ryan have sun moon conjunction, which means they were born around a new moon, which means that not all new moon babies, but if you are born on a full moon, you tend to be very reflective because you're pulled in opposite direction between your conscious awareness and your unconscious. So Ryan and Blake just kind of like, especially Ryan, man, like he just freaking goes. He has instinct and he moves on it. So in the short term or like in business, that could be really good. In terms of if he uses that in a way that is low frequency, well, is he thinking long term, And the fears that are associated with this are many. Yeah, you've got fear of inadequacy, fear of the future, so this is fear of inadequacy, fear of the future, fear of the past. This is fear of responsibility. And then we've got fear of authority down here, I believe, and fear of purpose or death, and then fear of failure here. So he doesn't have this one defined, which doesn't mean you're never going to feel that. It just means that he feels all those other ones consistently. And so what happens when you are somebody who is feeling tons of fear consistently? Well, you're probably going to want to control things. And so it's like a never-ending pattern. That's what I was saying about the moon in Scorpio, how you have somebody who has moon Scorpio here and also somebody who has moon Scorpio here, right? Justin and Ryan both have moon Scorpio, but you can see the different aspects coming out here. It seems to me that Justin, and this is my opinion, it seems to me that Justin uses that moon in Scorpio as more of an intensity to fight, right? Because the co-ruler of Scorpio is Mars, and he's got Mars conjunct moon as well. So he wants to be that emotional fighter, right? He wants to go out there and fight for people or for himself or whatever, for a cause. And so he's kind of gotten that, and he wants to bring forth that emotional intensity that he has regarding those things. For Ryan, I feel like it's more like that Scorpio intensity because Scorpio can also be paranoid, especially moon in Scorpio, and that it's never enough. I feel like he has more of a propensity to move from fear based rather than love based and acceptance and surrender, which is why he probably doesn't like Justin, because Justin's all about like spirituality and just like letting things happen and have purpose and meaning. And Ryan's like, heck no, we gotta control things. We gotta move. And so like he looks at that and he's like how he made fun of him pretty much in his movie, about being nice pool. Ryan's like, we gotta take action. We gotta take control of the situation. We can't just surrender. So this is very interesting to me. Let me know if you guys see anything that I'm not seeing in here that you guys think, if you know human design or if you know astrology. I want to hear, like, what do you think is super, super important or could be showing us like what is going on during this time? Feel free to comment on transits as well, because like I said, I didn't really look at transits as much because this video is already like way longer than I expected it to be. Actually, that's a lie. I have 9 gates here or 7. I don't know, I have a lot of throat gates. Okay, so I like to talk. I just wanted to do more of the looking at their chart and just seeing what are the propensities, right? What are the ways in which the charts can show how they tend to be, right? This is not a way in which they have to be. It's never like that with astrology or human design. And we can't really say that anyways, because there's so many possibilities within each placement and the house it's in and the aspect that it makes. And even just within the archetype of Scorpio itself, there are so many ranges of possibilities of how a human can actually show scorpion traits or scorpionic traits or not, right? So it's just interesting. It's just interesting, and it's so subjective. That's why when people are like, I'm taking an objective view of this chart, and it's like, no, it's not, because you're looking at it through your lens. So the way that I understand this chart is going to be very different than the next astrologer who understands it. So that's kind of the beauty of it too, right? Because you get to have all these different interpretations and learn through different astrologers and see which ones you gravitate towards and which ones you don't gravitate towards as much. Yeah, let me know your thoughts. I look forward to doing more of these case studies with you guys in the future, and I will see you guys next time.